So anyway, well, good evening, everyone, for joining us, and welcome to Director Margaret Young's Ward 3 briefing. I'm Clifford Chan. I'm the General Manager for East Bay MUD. Just a quick background about East Bay MUD. We provide water and wastewater service to many cities in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We like to think of ourselves as very much part of the community. And to keep our water and wastewater services running, we have about 2,000 employees working around the clock to make sure that those services are reliable. Director Young's ward includes Orinda, Moraga, El Sobrante, portions of Pinole, Richmond, and Oakland, and the city of Piedmont. And as she likes to describe it, her ward hugs the watershed. Director,
I don't get to today.
Sorry. I do want to say that Director Young, she really is passionate about protecting water quality in the environment, is committed to infrastructure investment and supporting water affordability and accessibility. I started as general manager last year, and I really was very fortunate to have her as a board president when I did start. Tonight we have a number of presenters that you can see, really answering some of the big questions that you may have in your mind about your water supply and wastewater. And then really to start things off, and I know Mona's still trying to pull things up, but I'd like to introduce Director Young.
Thank you, Clifford. Yeah, it's just a joy to work with our general manager, Clifford Chan, and all of the other people that'll be presenting tonight, who are really tireless public servants, providing us with our water and wastewater and protecting the watershed that provides that water in the bay, that receives that water when we're done using it. So tonight's briefing is sort of thematically answering the big questions. So far, we cannot answer the big question of why our slides aren't showing up on the screen, but hopefully that will be resolved in a moment. As Clifford said, I'm Marguerite Young. I was elected to Ward 3 in 2014. So I am rounding up on the end of my second term here, which concludes in 2022. And it's just been really a pleasure to get to know all of the parts of the community I represent, which, as Clifford said, really wraps its way around our local watershed, from a lot of Oakland and the city of Piedmont, up and over the hill to Orinda, Moraga, and then down Dam Road to El Sobrante, parts of Richmond and Pinole. And I don't recognize all the names here, but I do think I see Eduardo Martinez, one of our council people from the city of Richmond, if that's the same Eduardo that I think it might be. Any other elected officials that have joined us, if you could use the raise your hand feature, that would help me see who's here with us tonight. Again, as I said, our theme tonight is answering the big questions, and those big questions, I'm just going to run through them, and each of our staff tonight will take on a few of them. First one, who are we? Who is East Bay MUD? Second, where does our water come from? Third, and this is, I think, a big one that might be on everyone's mind. Are we still in a drought? How are we preparing our water supply for climate change? What are we doing to protect public health and the environment? How are we doing financially? How are we helping our East Bay residents? What's happening in Ward 3? In other words, what's the work that we're doing in the community? And then what does the future of water look like? There's a lot of changes and innovations going on. And actually one of the things that I am most loving about our general manager's stint so far is that he's always thinking about how can we innovate, how can we do something big next, and you'll be hearing about some of that as we go forward. So next mean, we advance slides, or are we still trying to figure out how to?
Okay, do you see them, first of all? Can you
Yeah,
see-
but yes, we're seeing more.
Okay.
But it's still showing kind of a slide view.
Okay. Let me see if
So I
can-
think you want to go to,
Just take it out presenter mode. You have it in the slideshow, but you can see the speaker notes.
Okay, sorry. All right,
Hmm.
let's see if I can find it.
oh, right, those are speaker notes, right? I
Okay,
think,
I need to switch screens.
no, I think if you do display setting,
Sorry.
go up to display settings. Do you see that above? Tap on that.
It's,
Tap the down arrow on that.
it's not on mine.
It-
Okay,
well,
hang on.
somebody just tapped it. There's a down arrow next to the word display settings.
Try.
The other side.
Okay. All right, better?
Yes, there we go. Okay.
Yay.
Now, if you were paying attention, I just went through all of those questions. We're going to go to the next slide. So who is EBMUD? This is a graphic of our service area. EBMUD was founded 98 years ago. And it was, we grew out of a collection of water agencies that were in existence around the East Bay at that time. If you pay particular attention to the street, as you're walking along, you might see on the little water caps that are access to our valves and things, you might see names like East Bay Water Company or People's Water or Contra Costa Water Company. Those are the main water companies that we formed out of that were working in the Bay Area, kind of a ragtag bunch, 100 years ago, and formed the early days of EBMUD, which was then followed by rapid population growth, rapid growth of our service area, and just like today, times of drought and times of plenty. So we've been focused on our mission of providing reliable water supplies at affordable rates while protecting the environment for nearly 100 years. The infrastructure, believe it or not, the infrastructure from those old systems, some of which are 150 years old, are still in place today, some of them functioning just swimmingly, others in need of renewal. And so we are really focused for our next 100 years on making sure that our infrastructure is in ship shape, and that we're prepared for the changes that climate will bring, and thinking about how we can be serving our customers into the next century. We currently serve 1.4 million customers drinking water every day. We also treat wastewater. If you can go back, the green striped area is where we provide wastewater services. So our Oakland and Piedmont folks in Ward 3 also receive wastewater services from EBMUD. Next slide. So our water supply begins up in the McCollum watershed, which is in the Sierra, and the water is captured in Pardee Reservoir and Comanche Reservoir for flood control and fish releases, and then travels 90 miles by gravity to our service area. Almost all of our water is gravity fed. So the water that's coming out of your tap, unless you live up in the hills, and actually a lot of Ward 3, actually we do have to pump some water, but for a bunch of our service area, we don't. So that's about, in a normal year, an average year, that's 90% of our water supply. And then next slide. About 10% of our water supply comes from the reservoirs that you probably know and drive by all the time, or maybe hike around. San Pablo Reservoir, Briones, Upper San Leandro, and occasionally Lafayette Reservoir. That's about 10% of our water supply in a normal year, but we are in anything but normal years these days. And so to talk about our first big question, next slide, are we still in a drought? Mike Tognolini, I will take over and answer this question and several more. Mike?
Thank you, Director Young. My name is Mike Tognolini. I'm the Director of Water and Natural Resources at EBMUD. And yeah, the question on everyone's mind, of course, is, are we still in a drought? You can go to the next slide, please. The simple answer is no. Simple answer is yes, we are still in a drought. No, we are not out of a drought. I just wanted to share this chart, which kind of plots what our water storage has looked like in our system over the last 10 years. And what this is showing, and you can see here, based on the bar charts, our lowest storage levels were in 2014 and 2015. And here we are again in 2021 with low storage levels. The trigger that our board typically uses to declare whether or not we're going to be in a drought is if our end of water year storage, which is the end of September, is less than 475,000 acre feet on this chart, 475. So those are the 3 years where our board has declared a drought, and they did so this year in April. The board declared a stage 1 drought emergency for EBMUD and implemented voluntary water reductions of up to 10% and implementation of and procurement of our supplemental water supplies to enhance the water supply that we have in the East Bay. So currently our reservoirs are 57% full, and we did of course have a pretty large storm event in late October 24th weekend that did improve conditions. But when you look at overall, we still are in certainly in a drought mode. And one of the advantages, in addition to bringing additional water into our reservoirs, when it rains in October significantly, is everyone turns off their irrigation systems. And we saw a massive reduction in our water demand from our customers in October of about 55 million gallons per day. So next slide. So again, so far this year, we've received a little less than 14 inches of precipitation on the McKelvey watershed, which, as Director Young pointed out, is our primary source of water supply. And that 14 inches compares to last year at this time when we had only received less than an inch of rain. Our average for this time of year would be 5 inches, but what we're really looking to obtain over the course of the winter between October and March is an average of about 48 inches. So when you look at that 13.71 inches, where about a quarter of the way there, a little more than a quarter of the way toward our annual winter average in terms of precipitation. So we're off to a great start, but it's way too early to say the drought is over. We are still planning and assuming that if the rest of this winter is dry, we're going to be prepared to continue in drought operations in 2022. Next slide. So often we get asked during a drought, what about other sources of supply? What are we doing to be ready for droughts when they come? And certainly we know that they will come, and they have come repeatedly. So as the climate changes and we may be more susceptible to extreme events, more drought years, some very wet years mixed in, but for the most part, we're anticipating a dry climate with more drought years in the future. So to date, this is something we've been preparing for decades already. We've invested nearly $900 million to diversify our water supply portfolio to be prepared for a resilient and reliable long-term water supply. Next slide. And our first option and the option that we are actually using right now at this moment is to divert supplemental water supplies from the Freeport Regional Water Project This is a project that EBMUD built in partnership with Sacramento County Water Agency. It was completed in 2011, just in time for the 2014-2015 drought. And it allows the facility on the Sacramento River, allows us to import water from Sacramento River. And we have a contract with the federal government that allows us to take water in dry years. And we supplement that by purchasing additional water supplies from water sellers on the water market in the state of California that may have water available to sell. And that helps us lessen the need for mandatory drought restrictions on our customers. This year, we started diversions at the Freeport Regional Water Project in October of 2021, October 4th to be exact. So we've been diverting water for a little over a month now, and our plan is to continue to divert water through that facility, if necessary, through the end of February, unless we get significant, very significant rainfall between now and then. Now, while it's operating, I'll just share that it diverts about 90 million gallons of water per day from that facility, and runs that water is conveyed to the East Bay. So that's a little over half of the water that we are currently serving our customers, just to give you a sense of the scale of the amount of water we're diverting there. Next slide.
Mike, can I just interject for a second? I want to
Yes.
just remind people that if you have questions, please use the Q&A box. We've got one question pending. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation, and maybe some of your questions will be answered over the course of that. But please do use the Q&A feature to ask your questions as we're going along. Continue, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. So of course, in addition to supplemental supply, water conservation is a critical element of our long-term water supply strategy. We need to make the most of the water that we already have available to us. And East Bay MUD's been a leader in water conservation for many decades. We've invested in water efficiency strategies, conservation programs, initially in appliances and fixtures that might reduce water use. We're getting close to saturating the market in those areas, and are focused on other strategies. Efficient irrigation systems, lawn conversions are also available. So we have a wide range of conservation programs that are available. And I'll just reference that if you're interested in our drought program, including our water conservation program, a good source of information is ebmud.com/drought. So since the last drought, so we've been conserving all along. Since the 2014-2015, 2016 drought, East Bay residents and businesses have continued to conserve, and we actually used 13% less water in 2020 than we did in 2013. So now when we're asking for additional customer conservation, it's on top of the 13% that's already been reduced and locked in. So our customers do an excellent job of conserving, and we're very proud of that. And we'll continue to ask for reasonable water efficiency programs to stretch our water as far as it can go. Next slide. Another way that we make efficient use of water is by using it again. And our recycled water program has been in place since the 1990s, and it offsets drinking water use. So anytime that we can provide an irrigation customer or an industrial customer with recycled water, that means that's less potable water that they need to take from our system, and it allows us to stretch our supplies further. We have a current capacity of 9 million gallons per day of recycled water production, and our goal is to increase that production by the year 2040 to 20 million gallons per day. So we're going to more than double what we're already doing. The table under the photo here, and this is a photo of our facility at East Bayshore, where we use membrane filtration to purify water to a level where it can be used for wastewater, to a level where it can be used for irrigation and other uses. So our focus is on large potential users, and that's shown as with this list here. The North Richmond facility, which went online in 1996, followed by the Richmond Advanced Recycling Expansion. those two facilities serve the Richmond refinery, and therefore reduce the amount of potable water that refinery needs to use, so that water can be available to the residents and customers of East Bay Mud. We also have an irrigation recycled water program in San Ramon. East Bay Shore is located at our Oakland wastewater treatment plant. It's currently producing a small amount, 0.2 million gallons per day or 200,000 gallons per day. And we plan to expand that significantly in the course of the next 10 years. We also have a small truck program that allows trucks that do things like wash parking lots and construction uses to access recycled water for, again, non-drinking water purposes at our wastewater treatment plant. So we focus on large irrigators and industrial uses, and we get the question, is it in our future a time where we might be purifying wastewater to the point where it can be used for drinking water directly? And regulations are still in process, and we continue to evaluate that as an alternative. It's not currently in our plan, but it is something that we do see that when you look out 5, 10, 15, 20 years, is something that will continue to be a viable water supply alternative when we look at our other sources that we may consider in the future. Next slide. Just very quickly, we're not just stopping at recycled water conservation and what we've done at Freeport. We're looking at other sources of water supply because we want to have a diversified water supply portfolio. In the event that one source is not available, if you have multiple sources, you have multiple options to respond in a resilient way to a drought. And that includes for us regional partnerships. And one that we're involved with at the moment is the proposed expansion of Los Vaqueros Reservoir. Our board has joined the Joint Powers Authority and will be within the next couple of years here determining whether it's feasible for East Bay Mud to participate directly in that program, and if so, procure a significant amount of new surface water storage that could be available to the East Bay Mud customers during a drought. We're also engaged in groundwater development, both in the East Bay as a groundwater sustainability agency, as well as working with entities in the San Joaquin Valley on potential groundwater storage opportunities. Next slide. So all of these potential sources of supply are kind of included in a master plan, and that master plan that we use is the Urban Water Management Plan that's updated every 5 years. We just completed the latest version of the Urban Water Management Plan, and it's available on our website. It was adopted just this summer, and that plan includes a water shortage contingency plan that lays out what we should do as we get deeper and deeper into a drought. What are some of the scenarios that might play out? And again, as I mentioned before, portfolio diversification. Next slide. Another question that we get frequently during a drought is, why don't we just do desalination? Why can't we just pump water from the bay, desalinate it, and use it for drinking water? It is an alternative that's been a part of our long-term plan. We did do a study in 2000, that started in 2003 with a regional partnership to look at brackish water desalination in the Pittsburgh Antioch area that could then be put into our system. Brackish water, in the Pittsburgh Antioch area, the water's not as salty, requires less energy to remove the salt. But the fact remains that desalination has a high operating cost, requires lots of energy, and does have salt brine disposal issues. We'll continue to look at it, but at this point, it doesn't rise to the top of the list for East Bay Mud. We have other alternatives that we think at the moment are more cost-effective and more environmentally benign in developing supplemental supply. Doesn't mean we won't eventually get to desalination, but it's not at the top of our list of alternatives at the moment. Next slide. So that's a bit about how East Bay Mud is planning for future drought and addressing water supply with respect to climate change. I want to change now and talk a little bit about what we're doing to protect public health and the environment. I'm going to talk a bit about what we're doing on our watershed, and then I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Wastewater, Eileen White, who's going to talk about, a little bit more about public health and protecting the bay. Next slide, please. So an important part of our program in managing our watershed lands and managing the river, the McKellamie River, which is the source of water for our 1.4 million customers, is that we very carefully manage Chinook salmon on the lower McKellamie River. And we have responsibilities for doing that. And what we've learned over the years is that maybe one of, if not the most important factors in protecting fish on the lower McKellamie is to have enough cold water so that those fish can thrive in those river conditions when they're there. And so that's especially challenging during a drought when supplies are limited, storage levels are low. So we have a very robust program and take many different, use many different tools to make sure that we keep enough cold water in the lower McKellamie River to protect fish. And it's called adaptive management. We adapt how we manage the river based on the conditions in that year type. And it also affects how we manage our reservoirs. We might want to save a lot of cold water in our deep Pardee reservoir and then move that water down when it's needed through our shallower Comanche reservoir so that we can preserve that cold water. That's an example. So our program has been uniquely successful when it comes to cold water management. And you may hear in the news about rivers up and down the state struggling with temperatures and salmon mortality because of warming temperatures. But in fact, our river has done an excellent job of managing cold water to the point where fish have been moved from other rivers. This summer, we moved 500,000 steelhead from the American River to the McKellamie River because it acted as a cold water refuge. So we're very proud of that. Next slide. All right, another part of environmental protection and frankly, public safety is how we manage our lands to protect for wildfire, and that includes fuel management. We have for a long time managed very strategically our fuels with a variety of techniques and methods that we use to manage vegetation, from grazing. We have goats, we have cattle that we use on our lands to manage, to graze. We do direct physical removal of brush and vegetation. And we also use fire as a tool, prescribed fire as a tool to manage vegetation on our land. Our land is not just a monolithic, forest of watershed land. We actually have a system of fire roads and fuel breaks throughout our watershed, and we have about 28,000 acres of watershed land in the East Bay and a similar amount in the McKellamie foothills. We manage those fuel breaks and fire roads in a way to try to contain, in the unusual event that we do have a wildfire in one part of our watershed, those fuel breaks and fire roads act as a mechanism to contain the fire within a certain zone instead of spreading throughout our watershed. So we do have an active strategy that we use. And I'll just mention specifically in the Orinda area, there was a significant die-off of Monterey pine trees this last year around San Pablo Reservoir. And once the bird nesting season ended, we have now initiated an active removal program to remove dead pines around San Pablo Reservoir. We're removing about 100 trees a week at our current pace. And we have until early spring to get this done before nesting season starts again. And so we're going to get as many trees as we can, as long as the weather allows us access to those areas where we've seen significant pine die-off. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen White, who's going to again talk about our public health and bay protection issues for East Bay Mud.
Thank you, Mike.
Great. So I want to talk briefly about how EBMUD uses a multi-pronged approach to ensure the water we provide to our 1.4 million customers is safe to drink, and kind of how Mike was talking about the watershed. First, it begins at the source. So we do everything we can to protect our source water quality. Then what we do is we continuously monitor the water as it comes into the treatment plant, so we know how to optimize the treatment of the water, and then we monitor the water as it leaves the treatment plant. Then each day we have inspectors that go out into the water system, and they go to all the different areas of the water system, whether you're in North Berkeley, South Berkeley, Oakland, Piedmont, and they take water quality samples. They bring them back to our state certified lab that's located at the on the same property as the wastewater plant at the foot of the Bay Bridge. And those samples are analyzed daily to ensure your water is safe to drink. And then in addition, what we've been doing as we've become aware over the last several decades about the side effects of disinfection byproducts and the harm, we've taken multiple strategies and implemented operational strategies to minimize the disinfection byproducts from our water when we treat it with chlorine. We no longer do the pre-chlorine that we used to do. We make sure we minimize our disinfection byproducts, and they're significantly below the state and federal levels. Another thing we've done, because water quality is something we really like to pride ourselves on, is we have spent millions of dollars in upgrading the ozone systems at our Sobrante and Upper San Leandro water treatment plant, which provide water to our West of Hills customers and to the customers that live within Director Young's ward. So we do everything we can to not only ensure our water is safe to drink, but also to maintain our high quality drinking water and to minimize any tastes and odors that come during times of droughts when you have algae blooms. And then next, I'd like to talk about one of the initiatives we've embarked on as far as we've taken protecting public health to a whole new level during the pandemic. And throughout the whole pandemic, we've been collaborating with public health officials, universities, and the private industry to collect data on the levels of coronavirus in EBMUD's wastewater. And this is possible because people who are sick with COVID-19 shed the virus particles in their poop. My three sons love to hear me say that word. And this creates what's referred to as the sewage signal. We collect samples of the wastewater and analyze the sewage signal for the 740,000 people living within our wastewater service area. And the sewage signal represents the spread of the virus at the population level, not the individual level. So in other words, the sewage signal tells us what's going on for all 740,000 people within our service area. And as a result, the impact of the sewage signal is much larger than that of individual testing. And this was particularly important during the beginning of the pandemic. We've since then broken our service area into 3 separate areas and been testing it and providing that information weekly to the local county health officers, to the public health department at the state level, and also to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, as they're continuing to track the spread of coronavirus within the Bay Area and throughout the country. And what's remarkable is, and we didn't have time to get into detailed discussion tonight, but in July and August, the sewage signal increased significantly due to the spread of the Delta variant. And because you shed the virus before you have symptoms, it's a leading indicator to the presence of coronavirus in the community. So it's a very useful tool for the public health officials to use this information to inform their decision-making and how they want the public as far as shelter-in-place orders and what their advice they want to give them. So it's been very useful, and it's been great for EBMUD to be able to partner with our local health officers and the state and CDC to take protecting public health to a whole new level during this pandemic. Next slide, please. And the next, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is our wastewater service area, as I mentioned, is 740,000 customers. It's expected to grow to 1.1 million customers by 2050. And the photo in the upper corner represents a partnership and collaboration we have with a number of key stakeholders. We partner with EPA, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Baykeeper, and numerous other agencies to understand San Francisco Bay and the health of San Francisco Bay. We've been studying nutrients. San Francisco Bay is a very nutrient-enriched estuary, but so far we have not seen the impacts of other nutrient-enriched estuaries worldwide, but we're studying that because it's San Francisco Bay we want to protect. We also go out and monitor not only for nutrients, but for contaminants of emerging concerns. So there's a real partnership between East Bay MUD and other stakeholders here in the Bay Area to really protect San Francisco Bay. And then in the lower photo is a photo of one of our inspectors inspecting a private sewer lateral. And what I want to talk to you is about what happens in rainy days. About 2 weeks ago, Sunday, on October 24th, when we had the big storm, we saw flows in our system, which are 50 million gallons today, go up to over 500 million gallons. It increased tenfold. And you say, why is that? Was everybody flushing their toilets while it was raining? No, that's not why. What it is during rain events, the rain infiltrates into the leaky old sewer pipes that are in the ground of the various cities and makes its way to the wastewater treatment plant. And it makes it very challenging to be able to treat these large flows during storm events. So we've partnered with our local cities, Oakland, Berkeley, Piedmont, Albany, Emeryville, and Steed Sanitary District, and worked with EPA and the regional board to make the best use of the ratepayer dollars by investing in fixing this old infrastructure. So instead of building $1 billion worth of storage and new treatment, what we're doing is we're focused on fixing our aging infrastructure. So all the cities are fixing their aging sewer pipes. East Bay MUD is spending several $1 million a year, leveraging various technologies to identify where the rainwater infiltrates into the sewage pipes. And we give that information to the cities, which then use that to prioritize which sewer pipes need to be fixed. In addition, when people sell their homes, like you see here in the lower photo, people are supposed to get their private sewer lateral inspected. The private sewer lateral is a small pipe that takes the sewage from the home to the main sewer pipe in the street. Majority of these private sewer laterals are old and leaking. And if you get it inspected and it leaks, then you must get it fixed. And we think this is the best way to make use of ratepayers' dollars by fixing our aging infrastructure. Property owners fix their private sewer lateral. The cities fix their aging sewer pipes. East Bay MUD is fixing their large sewer pipes. And we're spending millions of dollars each year leveraging various technologies to identify where the leaks are in the system and to give that information back to the cities. So it's a real collaboration to protect public health, keep the stormwater in the storm water system, keep the sewage in the sewage pipes, and then we continue to protect public health in San Francisco Bay. And next slide, I'd like to turn it over to Sophia Sokoto, who is our Director of Finance, and she's going to talk about how we are doing financially. So if we can advance to the next slide.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Appreciate it. So in a couple of slides here, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're doing financially, and I'm going to start off with saying, telling a little bit about where your dollar goes when you pay your bill for East Bay MUD. So on average, when it comes to our water bill, of a dollar total, about 56 cents. So getting close to 60% of the bill is really about infrastructure improvement. So it's pipelines, reservoirs, treatment plants, pumping plants. That's work that we're doing to make sure that all of those pieces are in place so that the water can run from Part E all the way to your door. 28 cents is actually going for water service, that's storage, treatment, delivery, those kinds of things. 7 cents for administration, 4 cents for customer service. So that's the call center that you might call if you've got an issue, billing, collection, and our very strong water conservation programs, which promote, for example, gray water programs, which was one of the programs that I think one of the our audience members discussed in their question earlier. We also have about 3 cents going for natural resources management. So that's a lot of the work that Mike, who spoke earlier, manages. So public recreation, watershed management, fisheries programs, with 2 cents for regulatory compliance, which makes sure that we're meeting and exceeding all of our drinking water standards, as Eileen had discussed. So if we move on to our next slide, what you'll see here is on the right side, it shows where our capital improvement budget goes. And again, that is, as we just saw earlier, the biggest portion of the spending. So you can see here that of that specific kind of infrastructure spending piece, half of that is going to pipelines, and then the rest of it, all of the other areas that we spoke about, reservoirs, recycled water treatment plants, all of those other pieces. There were some questions. There was a question that was asked about our water bill, and Director Young answered correctly that our water bill is well, the revenues that come in are 2/3 on the volume charge, and so only 1/3 of our revenues come in on a fixed charge, despite the fact that actually more than 90% of our costs are fixed. So because we have the benefit of, in normal years, having the snow melt and rain that comes down into our system and that we're delivering, in which case we're not paying for those waters. We do pay for the water in dry years when we're buying those supplies that Mike talked about earlier. But the reality is that whether or not you use a drop of water, we have a lot of infrastructure that needs to be in place for you to be able to turn that on. But we really do want to make sure that we're incentivizing conservation, which is why 2/3 of our revenue comes in on that volume charge, as Director Young had said. So now on the left-hand side, in terms of this particular year, the major financial impacts that we're seeing are, one, it's not a normal year, so we don't have all of this snow melt and rainwater that we can definitely count on. And so to plan ahead, we have planned to buy water. And so the cost of that supplemental supply is estimated at this point at $14 million. And so that's additional money that we didn't necessarily plan for in our budget. So we didn't pad our budget for that, but we also have planned for ways to be able to pay for that. In addition, we ask that people cut back, and that's the right thing. But as I said, since 2/3 of our revenue come in on that volume charge, we expect that those cutbacks will cost us between $10 and $20 million, depending on what the cutback levels are ultimately. In addition, because of the coronavirus, working with the state of California, we were one of the first agencies to stop water shutoffs, and we have delinquent bills, and those delinquent bills are 12 million up to 16 million actually at this point. Next slide. So despite all of this, we have planned for these dry days, and we are in a strong financial position. We put some funds away into our rate stabilization fund, which is really kind of a coverage stabilization fund. It means that when we go to the markets to borrow money, we're not going to have to jack up our rates. We've got that money in reserve so that we can demonstrate coverage and continue to borrow the funds that we need to invest in our infrastructure. If you might ask, why are we borrowing that money? The answer is that we want to have intergenerational equity. We want the next person that lives in the house next door to you to be paying for those facilities, not just the person that's living there today. So we continue to have higher than budgeted development fees. Development continues to be strong in our area, and so that helps as well. We're asking new development to essentially reimburse all of our existing customers for the investment that was made so that they could join today. When we look at FY22 and beyond, we did adopt 4% rate increases for this year and the next year to come. Those are about 20% lower than we had previously projected. We'll have to see what happens. We've all seen, inflation has been relatively high this last year, so we're going to see what happens. The expectations are that'll come down. So keep your fingers crossed on that. And also, we know that there is going to be continued conservation. That's part of our plan. We actually hire people to, incentivize additional conservation and incentivize folks to make the kinds of changes in their homes and gardens to have that be a part of our essentially water supply planning. On the left, you'll see just some statistics on the increase in our bills on the water and wastewater side as a result of our latest increases. In general, our water is about a penny a gallon, and folks are paying 50% of our customers are paying $2.25 a day or less for their water service. Next slide. All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Andrew Lee, who's our manager of customer and community services. Andrew.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sophia. And we know that living in the Bay Area can be very expensive. We also know that the pandemic have affected the ability of many of our customers paying the bill, and especially those that are in our disadvantaged communities. So the question I'm going to answer tonight is really what are we doing to help our customers that are struggling financially. Next slide, please. So locally, East Bay MUD has been working very hard to promote our customer assistance program, also known as CAP. You may have seen some of the outreach material out there in billboard ads on newspaper about our program. So we're also doing our outreach activities very intentionally in areas that are hit hard by COVID. So as a result, we have seen a 30% uptake in CAP participation since the pandemic. This is the graph here is a snapshot of how our program have grown over the last 20 years. So as you can see here, for the first 18 years, our program has been growing at about 5% very steadily on an annual basis. But looking at the graph again, in the last 20 months, our program have grown by 30%. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. So we do track our CAP participation data very closely to ensure that the assistance is being extended to the community that need it the most. I know it's a little bit difficult to see on this map here, but really the key takeaway here is that more than 85% of all our program participants are in disadvantaged communities. The map that you see here is also the same type of tool that we use at East Bay MUD to help develop our outreach efforts to target specific communities where we promote our program to increase awareness. And in August, we actually ran an ad campaign with our local transit agency to raise awareness about our program. And the ad campaign, what they did is that we use bus route that go through the specific disadvantaged communities highlighted in this various shades of red to promote the CAP program. Next slide, please. Our program is income-based, so you have to be within a certain income range to qualify for the program. And given that we are in a Bay Area, the cost of living obviously is very expensive. So we adopted a local area median income to help qualify our customers for the program. And what this means that we offer a very generous threshold in order to have greater participation from our customer that are struggling. And for that, for the customer who are enrolled in our program, they would receive 50% credit on their water bill for up to 1,050 gallons of water per each member of the household monthly. And why we have a threshold is because we also want to encourage conservation as well. So if the CAP customers is within our wastewater service area, that same customer would also receive a 35% credit on the wastewater bill. Next slide, please. So in addition to all the work that we're doing at East Bay MUD locally in meeting the need of our customers, we also engage in other activities to bring additional assistance to our customers. Our staff has been working really hard, working with the California Department of Housing and Community Development to receive and apply utility wage relief fund from the Emergency Rental Relief Program for households that have applied for the program and receive assistance from that program. We're currently also working on applying for relief fund through the California Water and Wastewater Wage Payment Program. And that application will be submitted to the state on behalf of really all the customers that have been impacted by COVID for the limited window of March 2020 through June 2021. So our goal is to have that application submitted to the state by this month, so our customers can begin getting the help they need soon. And at the federal level, I was personally fortunate enough to be asked by the U.S. Department of Human and Health Services to assist them with the implementation of a nationwide low-income household water assistance program. And even though this is a program that only has funding for one-time emergency spending, I do hope that it would pave the way for a more permanent program going forward to further improve water affordability for all customers. So this is just a snapshot of things that East Bay MUD is working on to keep water affordable for all our customers. And with that, I'm going to pass the presentation to Serge to talk about what's happening in work 3. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew. Good evening. My name is Serge Terentiev. I'm an engineering manager in East Bay MUD's Engineering Construction Department. And in the next 6 slides or so, I will really focus on all of the infrastructure that it takes to provide clean, safe, reliable water service to our customers. Next slide, please. So there's quite a bit of infrastructure that's needed to provide water service to our customers. And this particular slide really gives you an overview of all of the projects that are currently either in progress or scheduled to start in the near future in Ward 3. So I won't have time to really go into the details of these projects. So I'll hit on a highlight of just a few of them. But as you see here on this slide, we have a lot of work planned in Ward 3. Including a project to seismically retrofit the Briones outlet tower. We have a photovoltaic project. I'll share a little details on that with you. And as a sort of an asset class, a big focus for the district, I think you heard Sophia talk about the level of investment we make in our infrastructure. And after pipelines, our highest level of investment is really in water treatment plants. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We have a lot of work planned at our Orinda and Sobrani water treatment plant. And we're also doing a lot of work that you see here on this slide at our pumping plants and reservoirs. We either rehab or replace these aging facilities just to keep up with maintenance and ensure that we continue having safe, reliable service for all of these distribution facilities. Next slide, please. So what I've summarized in this slide here are really two of the two large projects that we have in the city of Orinda. And I'll go in order, kind of cover different parts of Ward 3, highlight some infrastructure projects starting in Orinda, and next I'll cover some work we're doing in El Sobrani, and I'll really finish with some pipeline improvements we're doing in the Oakland area and highlight some capital infrastructure projects we have at our wastewater treatment plant as well. So starting in Orinda, I wanted to highlight the Orinda Disinfection and Chemical System Safety Improvement Project. That's really the largest upgrade in our treatment plant improvement program. And it's really the most substantial change in the treatment process we've made at the Orinda plant, one of our largest plants since it was built in 1935. So it's a very exciting project. And I've listed here some of the benefits of the project. It'll improve disinfection reliability and chemical safety. One of the main benefits of this project, it'll reduce the disinfection byproducts coming out of that plant. So it'll improve water quality as a result. It'll also increase the resilience of that plant against climate change. What you see here in the rendering in the upper right-hand corner is one of the treatment processes we'll be installing as part of that project, which is ultraviolet disinfection. Up here on the upper right, this is a 3D model we used to design a facility. We haven't started construction on that yet. This project scheduled to start construction next year and will take about 4 to 5 years to complete. So a very large effort. A second, I wanted to highlight a project that we have, a solar energy generation facility that will also be located in Orinda. The so-called Duffel PV project. It's a renewable energy project that we're very excited about. It's located off of Bear Creek Road across from PG&E Sobrani electrical substation. And as I've summarized here, this is a 5 megawatt facility that will really help us offset about 10% of our electric use. So it's a project that's scheduled to start next year and will take about a year to complete. Next, please. Next, I wanted to talk about some work in the El Sobrani area. So this is a northern part of Ward 3. This is a Maloney pumping plant and Sobrani water treatment plant improvement project. This is a very large project, approximately $38 million that we're spending on making some major upgrades to the electrical safety of the equipment that was obsolete, both at the Sobrani plant and Maloney pumping plant. We're also increasing the pumping capacity of that plant. And the electrical improvements will really help us be more resilient to make both of these facilities more resilient. The power feed to the pumping plant was going through an active landslide. And so we're adding a lot of redundancy to help make sure that both of these facilities, that pumping plant and our treatment plant, have reliable power supply. And it also, at the same time, eliminates some electrical hazards. What you see in the picture here, I think is very interesting. It shows an old natural gas driven pump that's in the process of being lifted out of the old out of the Maloney pumping plant, so it could be replaced with some more efficient vertical turbine pumps. And so that work is currently in progress and scheduled for completion late next year. Next. Now I'm going to focus really on the last part of the infrastructure focus, highlighting some of the pipeline replacement work that we're doing. We have a very large pipeline replacement program. We currently have about 12 crews replacing pipelines throughout our distribution system. Here, this particular slide really focuses on the part of Ward 3 that's in Oakland, where we have a lot of older cast iron pipes. We're scheduled in this current fiscal year 2022 to replace about 5.5 miles of pipe. And it's a little hard to see, but in purple, you see some of the clusters of pipelines that are scheduled for replacement. We have a goal district-wide to replace about 20 miles of pipe throughout our system. And one of the efforts as part of our pipeline rebuild program and includes a lot of the work we do in Oakland is really collaborating with the cities that we work in. Pipeline is probably the most disruptive part of our infrastructure renewal program because we really do the work in the street. So one of our goals is to coordinate our pipeline replacements with other utilities and also cities. And to do that, we've really partnered very closely with Oakland to see if we could enter in agreements with them in terms of pavement restoration. And a couple of examples of that, we've also done that in the city of Orinda. We've partnered with the city of Orinda on the Bear Creek pipeline replacement project, where the city will be retrofitting Bear Creek Bridge next year. And the district will include its pipeline replacement with the city's contract under a utility agreement we've entered with them. Another example, we presented on this, in fact, last night at the Orinda City Council, is the Happy Valley Pipeline Project that's currently scheduled to be completed next year. We partnered with the city of Orinda earlier this year to enter into utility agreement, a pavement agreement, where we are paying towards the final pavement restoration as a result of our project, and the city will complete the final pavement as part of a larger paving project that they have planned in the city of Orinda on minor roads. So a lot of collaboration as part of this work. And as Sophia mentioned, this is really pipeline replacement represents our largest level of investment in our capital improvement program. And last but not least, I wanted to highlight some of the capital improvement work going on at our main wastewater treatment plant called SD1. And we really have a lot of work either in progress or planned to start in the near future, really representing about 50 million in capital investment to maintain our aging infrastructure at our wastewater treatment plant. A highlight of some projects are noted on this slide. We're planning upgrades at our main wastewater treatment plant's digester, reactor basin, and secondary clarifier. Also making some improvements at our pumping stations, making improvements at our operations center, administration facility, and a testing lab that Eileen mentioned earlier in her presentation that's vital to our operation. We use that testing lab not just for wastewater, but on the water side for all of our water quality testing. And we're also making some improvements to our hydrochloride piping and pumping system, dechlor facilities, and also at our North Richmond water recycling plant. And with that, I will turn it over to our general manager, Clifford Chan, who will talk about innovation in the future of water and some of the partnering that EBMUD is doing.
Thank you, Serge. And so, yeah, as Serge mentioned, I'll end the presentation, really share with you what is that future of water and how we are innovating. So you heard tonight about the challenges that we're dealing with, from climate change to water quality, protecting the environment, supporting our customers, and managing our aging infrastructure. And we've been innovating here at EBMUD for the last 100 years. You heard early on about Pardee Dam, the dam that we built back in the 1920s. At the time it was constructed, it was the tallest concrete arch dam in the world. And we know we'll need to continue to innovate because the challenges that we face aren't getting any easier. And so what you see here in this photo is a high density polyethylene pipeline that we're working with UC Berkeley on that has fiber optics attached to it, so it can tell us about its condition. So, think of it like your smartwatch on your wrist that tells you about your health. We want our infrastructure to tell us about its health. And this pipeline will be installed across the Hayward Fault behind the Claremont Hotel. You go next slide. This is something we're really excited about. Last month, we entered into a partnership with UC Berkeley to build a center for smart infrastructure. Now, the idea behind this center is to develop an innovation ecosystem to help address those challenges that we talked about. This center will also be the hub for a lot of the other research activities at UC Berkeley. This includes their Pacific Earthquake Engineering Research Center, their SIM Center, the Berkeley Water Center, the Institute for Transportation Studies, Global Metropolitan Studies, the Center for Information Technology Research in the Interest of Society. And we'll also coordinate this work with the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. So we'll have the opportunity to work with researchers and scientists and engineers to develop remote sensors, data analytics, artificial intelligence tools, and other technologies. And since we live in earthquake country, one of the first projects as part of the center is the construction of a large-scale fault rupture pipeline testing facility. And also part of this partnership, and something that we're really excited about, is that we're going to develop an undergraduate course on utility infrastructure operations and management. And we're going to engage students in the East Bay communities to expose them to really all the exciting work that we do. And all this with the goal to create a pipeline of students who might not have otherwise thought about a career in water. Next slide. So this is just another example of how we've been innovating here at East Bay MUD. Now, while some of you, may seen, the main breaks, with the water shooting out of the street, the reality is most of the leaks don't surface and aren't visible from the street. And so we worked with a vendor to create a new, more sensitive leak detection logger to help us find those, non-surfacing subsurface leaks. We installed 2,000 of these loggers, and those are the dots in green and orange, throughout our service area. And we found and repaired over 300 leaks. And that saves about 90 million gallons of water each year. We also have plans to install 600 more of these in the coming months. We're also the first utility in North America to use satellite technology to find leaks. And finally, we work with another vendor and helped with the design of a high resolution pressure monitor to look for pressure surges in our system. Much like the water hammer in your home, that bang you hear when you close a valve too quickly in your house. Well, these pressure surges can damage pipes. So we installed 150 of these loggers throughout our service area to help pinpoint the sources of these pressure surges. Next slide. So finally, I want to talk a bit about our innovation with our wastewater operations. We developed an integrated master plan for our wastewater treatment plant that looks at all the components of our wastewater system. This is a 30-year roadmap, and we're leveraging resource recovery wherever possible. And so that includes these 4 components that you see on the slide. So we're looking at using biogas to generate energy, biosolids for land application and composting, nutrients for fertilizer, and recycled water to help supplement our water supply needs that you heard Mike Tognolini talk about earlier. And I think that's my last slide. So with that, we can open it up to questions.
Yeah, so we want to welcome folks to either type questions in or use the raise your hand feature. I've been trying to answer some questions as we go along, and I'm going to take the liberty of lumping a little bit. The first several questions we had have to do with, why, and before I got on the, became, educated, and not, it's like understanding the water bill is not an easy thing. But how is it that, when I use, the part of my water bill that is for the flow charge is about $8 every 2 months, hardly anything. But I know that folks in other parts of Ward 3 pay considerably more than that for the flow chart. So Sophia, could you take on a little bit more about why is it that some people, most of their bill is fixed and very little of it
Right.
is variable, and how it all balances out?
Yes, I will. So first of all, one kind of big important piece to keep in mind whenever you're looking at a water bill in the state of California is that we are required by law to essentially charge no more than the cost of service. And so that means that you have to have, demonstrated documentation that you are not charging folks, more than their fair share of costs. And so we have a cost of service document that essentially supports a very highly tiered water structure. So we have for single family residential customers, 3 separate tiers. So those of you that have very low bills are using your water all in tier 1. And so those that are essentially using a lot more water into tiers 2 and into tiers 3, and again, that's based on our cost of service. We've had to upsize our treatment facilities, we've had to upsize our pipes, and all that's built into their cost of service, essentially for those higher levels of water use, are paying a much higher percentage. So overall, 2/3 of our costs are coming in on that variable rate. It's getting dark in here right now because we have lights that make sure that they turn off when we don't need them at the office, because we're thinking about our energy usage and our carbon footprint. So also the other piece that I want to share, there was someone in the, so basically for those of you that have very low water usage, what happens is that your fixed portion dominates. And so that's what you're experiencing because you're such, Mike, of such a low water user. Barbara had a second question that had to do about her bill, and that was separate, and that was about the elevation charge. So one of the points that Clifford likes to make when he's talking about the elevation surcharge is that if you think about how much water we have to pump up if you live on a hill, think of how many Priuses that you're actually having to lift. If you think of how heavy a Prius might be with all the batteries and so on to bring that water to your house. So as Director Young, I think had said when she started in her comments, we serve more than 50% of our customers entirely by gravity. So there's enough head essentially from Pardee, from our main dam that's on the border of Amador and Calaveras counties, that we're able to serve more than 50% of our customers entirely by gravity. But for those who live at any kind of an elevation where essentially we are required to pump, we don't spread those costs over anyone except for those that are living in those areas. So that's why those costs are more. We have to have reservoirs that we need to build and maintain. We have pumps that we have to build and maintain, and then we've got the cost of energy itself to do the pumping. And so all of those only go to those who are living at elevation. So that's the piece around the elevation surcharge. So yes, Mike is correct that he's not seeing that 2/3 of his bill is variable, but 2/3 of the revenue that comes into the district is variable because of our highly tiered rate structure. And again, this is all based on our cost of service. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Sophia. The other question that I'm going to ask Clifford to take on after I make an initial comment really has to do with, what is East Bay MUD's role in addressing the larger issues of water supply and drought and climate change beyond our borders. I mean, we don't have agriculture, which is a high water user in the state of California. We have because of the work we've done over decades, a fairly diverse supply. We're pretty resilient in terms of drought, but we know that some of our neighbors aren't. Zone 7 in the eastern part of Contra Costa County is, getting nervous about their supply. Marin County, parts of Marin County are in a very serious shape. And that's just talking about the Bay Area. And we know that in the Central Valley and throughout California, there's 1 million people in the state that don't have access to clean and safe water. So we're, we're not putting blinders on and putting up a fence around our area. Clifford, could you talk about some of the things that we're doing to try to create a more sustainable water future in the big picture?
Yeah, I can do that. And I'll just quickly add on, since Sophia mentioned the Priuses, the average, the median water user uses about 150 gallons of water per day household. And, to put that in perspective, in a month, that's about 40,000 pounds of water that we have to pump up. And so if you think of that in terms of Priuses, that's about 13 Priuses every month that we're lifting just to bring water to your house. Back to the question, Director Young, that you asked about, climate change and what we're doing. So, regionally, if you look at the region, Mike talked about this, we understand that climate change is going to make water supplies more difficult. So one of the things that we've done here at East Bay MUD is to work on regional collaborations like the Los Vaqueros expansion to help all the agencies, including Zone 7, Alameda County Water, Valley Water, San Francisco, East Bay MUD, Contra Costa Water, more resilient to climate change. That's one way we've done it. More broadly, as far as how can we help water utilities understand the impact on climate change, we work very closely with the EPA to develop a tool, a resilience tool for utilities to go through to look at their particular circumstances and do a risk assessment and develop a plan on how they can respond to climate change, not just for water supply, but sea level rise, wildfire, all types of risk associated with climate change. So we have taken our experience to not only work regionally to help us and our regional partners, but also nationally to help develop tools that any utility can use, water and wastewater, to help understand the climate risks.
Great, thank you, Clifford. The next questions I'm going to lump, and I hope you'll appreciate that I'm trying to both save time, but also kind of cover the landscape here, is that I had a couple questions related to different kinds of conservation efforts that we could incentivize, as well as looking at, what are we doing to support rainwater capture or prevent, stormwater runoff, which is, part of, we do have a fairly robust conservation incentive program, including you can put together your own proposal and present it to us and see if that's something that we could support with some rebates or incentives to support conversion on different kinds of landscaping. In terms of the stormwater issues, so it's one of those issues where we're not the only agency responsible. We're not, even though we and Eileen might want to take a piece of this, but when we're talking about that big storm surge, part of it is making sure it doesn't get into the sewer lines. So that's something that cities are responsible for, but we're working with them collaboratively on. But then how could we help keep the rain infiltrating into the ground and extending the water season, basically extending the irrigation season by, doing more landscaping? That's something our custom conservation rebates can help. But I don't know, Eileen, do you want to take?
Sure, I can elaborate a little bit. And we are partnering with a number of universities, and what's kind of become new words is One Water. So we're beginning to look at, how does stormwater fit in meeting the needs for water, and how would it work? It does get kind of complicated with regard to, as Sophia said, the cost of service. We're responsible for the water system and the wastewater system, and stormwater is a different jurisdiction, but we're all starting to come together to realize, to address climate change and to address future droughts, that stormwater could be part of the solution. So we've been partnering with Berkeley and Stanford and looking at this, and they're holding a number of workshops and getting the private industry and the utilities together and the universities to see how stormwater could help long-term as part of the solution to climate change and droughts.
And it's one of the things that our UC Innovation Center will be, that we're helping to support, will be taking on as well. Let me see. I had one kind of specific question, and this would be, how do we fix leaks that are underground that we can't see?
So that's if you're looking at the water system, on the drinking water side, that's, what we were talking about. All those leak detection loggers that we're putting out there, it listens for these small leaks. And when we find them, the devices are actually good enough that they can pinpoint where the leak is located. And then once we know where the leak is, we'll dig it up and repair it.
Okay, I think if there's somebody had a question about Los Vaqueros, Eduardo, I think that was you, and we don't know yet. We're early days. We haven't decided whether we're formally gonna, we've decided to join the Joint Powers Authority, but whether we decide at the end of the day to be a project partner, still up in the air. So Eduardo asked a question about how would we determine how much water would we take from Los Vaqueros, and the answer really is we don't know. At this point, unless Mike has Togolini has a more precise answer, but I think the answer is we don't know yet.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we're several years probably from knowing having a more precise answer to that question. I don't see any other sort of subject area questions, and we are definitely over the time that we said we would help or that we would keep you tonight. I want to thank you for your attention. I think we kept basically everybody for the whole period of time. I hope this was informative. I hope you learned something about East Bay Mud that you didn't know. I hope you will tell your friends that it's fun to learn about where your water comes from and where it goes. And that you will seek us out if you have further questions. I think we'll make sure that we have complete answers to all the questions that were asked this evening, and we'll send it out to the folks that participated so that you've got a record of that. And with that, I just want to thank all of our staff for working late tonight and thank all of you for attending. Good night now.
Thank you.
Thank you.